Well, the first book I wrote was a novel, and it was kind of a racy novel.
Oh, yeah?
I can't.
Was it spicy?
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? My name is Adam, and I'm the host of the UKnowAdamTsang podcast, the show that is dedicated on bringing on passionate people, learning about their stories, and delivering value to entrepreneurs. So if that's what you're interested in, go ahead and follow, like, and subscribe. You know what I'm saying?
How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the UKnowAdamTsang podcast, where you get to know just a little bit more about people, passions, and all things business. Today, sitting across the way, I have Jordan Fennel of Legacy
Biographies.
Sorry about that. Legacy by blank right there. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. You are, in fact, one of the first writers that I've ever had on the show. Oh. And it was a pleasure getting your email to my inbox, complimenting my show, because we all love hearing about ourselves, and asking kind of like for the opportunity. So I'm so happy that you're here finally. I'm
glad that you were happy to get my email, because a lot of people were like, leave me alone, man.
No, not at all, not at all. Jordan, for people that are unsure of kind of like what a writer does in this day and age, please give us some information about what your company does.
A ghostwriter specifically.
Okay.
Well, ghostwriters, pretty much everybody, if you've read a nonfiction book in the last, 50 or 100 years, a ghostwriter probably wrote it with no credit.
Okay.
Especially if it's a tell-all book or a celebrity, or remember back in the day, Paris Hilton, everything was so hot and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm kind of dating myself there. But do you think Paris Hilton stopped jet setting long enough to sit down and write her life story?
Very hard. No, impossible.
Not that she couldn't do it. She's smarter than she lets on, I'm sure. I would hope. But but these people, they have more money than they have time.
Sure.
So they hire someone to tell their story. JFK did it with Profiles of Courage. Trump did it with The Art of the Deal. People found out later, he didn't write his book. Well, most people don't at that level. But what I specifically do is focus on memoir, people's life stories or biographies for other family members, telling that story for your family, or if you want to get your message out in the world. That's what I focus on. That's my niche.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask, how did you first come across this industry? Like, what kind of like led to this point in your life?
Well, like a lot of things, it's, circuitous way to get there. It's not like I woke up one day when I was 8 years old and said, I want to be a ghostwriter.
Yeah.
Like some people say, hey, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a lawyer or whatever. I was always a big reader, a big writer. My mom always read to me, like even before I was in school.
Wow.
And I was typing out little stories on this electric Smith Corona typewriter back in the day that my parents had in their little office. So I figured I was really good at reading and writing. I just enjoyed story and narrative. And my family, my dad is pushing 70 now, and he has 7 siblings. His oldest brother is 86.
Okay.
And they would all tell stories at family get-togethers. And so by the time I was like 10 years old, man, I knew what it was like during the Depression when my grandma was coming along, because my paternal grandmother and grandfather were born in 1918 and 1919. I didn't come along until 87.
Okay.
So I had this window into the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. Sound like a oldies radio station. The hits of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, right?
Yeah.
But that world was alive to me.
Sure.
And all these threads are going to come together to answer your question. But especially my grandfather, James Fennel, he died in 1963 from asbestos exposure in World War II. But there are only 2 pictures of him. They're not very good pictures, but I know him because of those stories.
Wow.
Like, he's real to me. Like when one of my uncles would tell a story about like playing basketball in the yard with him. And when I say basketball, this is before Michael Jordan and fouls were a thing.
Sure.
So he was like, my uncle was like, you didn't play basketball with Daddy. He just elbow you in the mouth and take the ball from you and do a layup and laugh about it. And he'd be like, you got to be tough to play ball with me, right?
Sure.
So that side of him, the mischievous side of him and the loving side of him and all that, I know him as a person, even though I never met him. And I still see the power of story.
Wow.
like that. And we used to do that organically.
So I have to ask because, I've been to certain family gatherings and, I think that it's becoming maybe a lost art, this storytelling. Yeah. So how do these stories start, right? Like when you guys get together as a family, when you guys sit down, like does somebody just like, all right, this is the story that I'm about to tell next, and there's like kind of like this like almost stage-esque type of like interaction, or how does that work?
That's a good question. I've never really thought about the process of how it comes up, and I'm sure every family is different, but it happens more organically. Well, especially if it's usually around food. Right. Yeah. Restaurant, okay. The what goes around food, the culture around food.
Sure.
And grandma would start talking about another time they had a family get together, who was there, and then that would bounce from one to another to another. Because a conversation, it's like a tree, it branches off, and you're bouncing from here to there to there. And that kind of thing, I saw the power of that, and it was like the movie was playing in my head of all these times. So I got older, going back to answer your question. If you can't tell, I try to rein myself back in. But I went to GSU and got a degree in creative writing, and Peter Christopher was my mentor there. He passed away in 2008. And putting this love of like family stories and the history, especially of this area and family histories, and the love of writing together, I kind of stumbled on to this later on because I taught high school for a couple of years.
Okay.
And I love teachers. I love the kids and all that, but the bureaucracy of it. Like, I like the entrepreneurial thing because you don't have somebody breathing down your neck all the time, So I looked around and I said, well, how can I help somebody? Mm-hmm. Because as you well know, you're not going to make a living doing something on your own if you're not helping somebody. Mm-hmm. So I thought, what can I do in my writing skills to help somebody? And I thought, well, there are plenty of people that they don't know how to gather this up. Mm-hmm. Because back in the day, you would be working in the field, women would be quilting. I met a lady a couple months ago from Woodstock, Georgia, and she was talking about quilting as like this subculture. Mm-hmm. These people go nuts over this stuff, and I had no idea, but it's getting together around a task and telling these stories, and it happens organically, like I said earlier. You don't really think about it, but it does. They would talk about the Bible. They would talk the women in the family when they were quilting. They would talk about the men. They would talk about, Gladys got her hair did downtown, and let me tell you what them women were talking about, and it would all just flow.
Sure.
But now we don't have to work in the fields like that.
That's right.
And when we do, we have enclosed air-conditioned tractors with GPS, and you're by yourself listening to the radio.
Sure.
That kind of thing. So I got to looking at it, and I thought, well, how can I help these people? And then I realized that there is a market for this. There's a job. You can go and record these people's stories. And I just took my writing ability for granted. I thought, well, why can't they write their own stories?
Sure.
But like this book here, And God Said No.
Okay. Recently?
Yeah.
Recently published?
It was published, it's on Amazon. It's published through Trinity Christian Publishing, which is a subsidiary of TBN, the Christian channel. It's a Christian memoir, obviously, by the name. And I found that I really had taken my skills for granted because I sat with this man at his table, 80 years old. He'd lived an amazing life. I mean, he was in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Bears attacked him in Alaska. He lived through an earthquake in Italy. He's almost died several times. Like, his dad shot and killed his mom and his grandma in their house.
Wow.
So he said, he said, I'm frustrated. This is my life. Why can't I tell my life story? I said, because you've been living your life. You're not a weirdo that went to school and got a degree in creative writing, And he was like, okay, I see what you mean, because I've met plenty of people way smarter than me. It's not about intelligence. It's about experience. Some people just have it. Some people don't. I've met doctors, lawyers, engineers that they say, when I retire, I'm going to write my life story. That's
sure.
what everybody says.
Sure.
Out of all of them that try, even start, very few of them can do it.
Yeah. Because
they don't have the time, they don't have the skill. I mean, you might be able to write a dissertation, but that's different than writing a book.
Sure.
Because the structure of
you
it.
Have to tie everything together.
And how to get the outline out, how to get it out of your head onto the page.
So what was the first book that you wrote?
Well, the first book I wrote was a novel, and it was kind of a racy novel.
Oh, yeah?
I can't,
was it spicy?
Yeah, that's what the guy wanted. It was like supernatural, and there was like all kinds of crazy stuff going on. It was a lot of fun to write. But it was under NDA. All the people that I've worked with had me sign a non-disclosure because that's another part of being a ghostwriter is the ghost part of it. You usually don't get credit.
Got you.
Except for this book, this fella, the reason that I'm probably going to talk about this one mostly,
sure,
if we talk about specific work, is this one because he let me put my name on the title page with him.
Okay.
It's TJ Paget with Jordan Fennel.
Understood.
And anytime you see on the cover, Keith Richards with so-and-so, that's the ghostwriter, did 95% of the work.
Understood.
So, yeah.
So, kind of open this window in share with me like this world of ghostwriting, because this is like an area that I've heard of them before, right? And specifically, I hear more of it in regards to artists that have like a ghostwriter, like rap artists or music artists that have somebody that's alongside with them. And so specifically for biographies, like how big is this industry? Is it like a network of writers that are working together? Like, how does this work?
It's like the Wild West, man.
Yeah.
There is no standardization. There's no standardization in price or how it's structured. There's really no way to know how many ghostwriters are out there.
Yeah.
Because it's so secretive.
It is. So people don't want they don't want other people to know.
Well, everybody except this fella, Mr. Paget, out of Jessup, Georgia. When I asked him about getting credit, he said, well, of course I'm going to give you credit because when this book comes out, people are going to ask me, he said, TJ, you're not a writer.
Sure.
How did this happen? He said, I don't want to lie to him because he's, staunch Christian.
Sure.
But most people, they say, well, I don't want anybody to know.
Sure.
And there's one fellow who's got way more money than me, and he said, if you tell anybody, if I find out about this, I will sue the pants off you.
Wow.
And I was like, I like my pants. And I want them to stay on,
So give me an idea of how many books that you've been involved with. You can give me like a number, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So how many books have you ghost written for?
4 books and a screenplay.
Screenplay?
Yeah, it just came out of nowhere. This guy said, it was a little aside here. He's like, could you write a screenplay? I'm like, I've never done it before. And he's like, well, I'll give you screenplays to look at as research. And he just started sending me money.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this money for? He's like, to do the research. I'm like, you're my man.
Okay, I like it. And so like, I guess I'm curious because it's such a, you said it's secretive, right? Like it's very like, so do you know of other ghostwriters? Like, is there a network of you guys that talk to each other?
There is, I'm part of a network. That sounds like I'm part of the mafia or something.
I like it.
It's a ghostwriter network. And they can send you work here and there, and you can apply for projects. But it's all very secretive when you talk directly with the client and the network. They take a cut of what you do.
Got you.
And then they come up with the NDAs. It's always mandatory NDAs. Nobody will ever know who you are or what you did.
Sure.
So that's one part of it. There's another way where you can go directly to a publishing house. A lot of ghostwriters work for publishing houses as employees, and they, throw them a pittance, and they take the $50,000 or $60,000 or $100,000 fee. The publishing house takes that, and just throws the ghostwriter enough to live on.
Understood.
So that works that way too. But also, like you said, with songs, they've been doing that for years, even back in the 50s and 60s in the Brill Building in New York. Like Carole King started out and started out like that, writing songs for other people, but they would get songwriting credit. So the ghostwriter is kind of like that, but they just don't get credit. Because these people can't always just turn on the creativity faucet and then it comes out. Sometimes you're looking for a number one and like, I just don't have it. I'm not in my right where I need to be. So this guy over here is a hit-making machine, but maybe he doesn't have he's not the total package,
Doesn't have the look or whatever.
Doesn't have the look, doesn't have the stage presence, but he's really good at writing songs.
Sure.
So, and the music industry, that's been happening for a long time.
That's
like you said, especially rap artists nowadays.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
But,
So, this actually draws into, the next question, because as an entrepreneur, as like you have your own company, as a ghostwriter, it seems as if like it's very difficult for you to advertise. Like how do you get the word out to people that you ghostwrite? It's not even like, can you send me a piece of your work? Unless you have someone that just just gave you permission, as in this case.
Yeah.
You don't have that, right? So how do you even What is your strategy of getting, I guess, other clients?
Well, that's the thing. I'm part of that ghostwriting network, but I'm not big on sitting around and twiddling my thumbs and waiting for somebody to bring me a client. I like to be proactive and go out there and do it.
Sure.
Things like this, just getting the word out there, and I'm glad that you let me come on here.
Absolutely.
And radio shows, especially for this kind of thing, it's usually an older audience.
Gotcha.
So Facebook, I've run Facebook ads, wasted a bunch of money on that. YouTube ads, wasted a bunch of money on that because those, like any business, you have to know your niche. You have to know your audience.
Sure.
They're usually not going to sign up with you. You have to go to them. And I haven't been doing that until I had something to show for it. Because if you come up to somebody, this is not a cheap service. Because you're talking about 6 months to a year.
Of just writing the research, talking through the stories.
And this all the way through to publication.
Wow.
So you're not just giving them a first draft like some ghostwriters will do. So I found that it's best to go in front of people. Go to civic groups, go to community events, places where you can get in front of people and have the old school business card. I got the little business card right here as a bookmark, People are like, business card, that's so 1986. Like, well, I mean, that's just how this works, especially in small towns, people expect that.
I'd like to throw a shout out there right now. There's a company called Storyworth. I don't know if you've heard of them. Have you? Like what they do is they, on a weekly basis, they send out a question to whoever you gift the book to. And after the 52 weeks, after answering these 52 questions that, this app is sending you, it will actually collect everything and then deliver a book.
Yeah.
But the funny part of this is actually I got this for my mom, because I think that her story is fascinating. I love to kind of know more. Maybe there's nuances that I don't know about, so forth and so on, that I want to hear more about.
There's always something else.
Yeah. But when she got the gift, the first week she was like, I don't know what to write. The second week she was like, you just need to go ahead and return this because I'm not going to do it. and that actually speaks to exactly what you're talking about how difficult it is to write this kind of story about your life. Yeah. There's a bit of a uncertainty, especially in certain situations, of how to shape the story, so forth and so on. And having somebody that's able to kind of walk that, and then actually. So what does this look like? You sit down with them, interview.
Yeah, actually, after this, I'm going to be going back to Jessup. There's another business owner in Jessup that signed up with me. Okay. I'm going to be going to his. Well, put it this way. He said his son is now the owner of it. And I said, so, what are your responsibilities? He said, basically whatever I want him to be. So if you want to come and interview me, we can go in the back room in their store.
Sure.
And I'm going to sit with him and interview him over probably a month and a half. Because what Storyworth, no knock on that. I think any kind of way you can get your story down, whether it's through scrapbooking, or maybe that's a 90s thing, we don't scrapbook anymore, or doing an interview on your phone, just a video interview, audio interview, any kind of way you can do it, even if it's, competition for me, it doesn't matter as long as you do it.
Sure.
Because I talked with a lady in Augusta a couple months ago. She said her grandmother died at 104.
All right.
And she said for 10 years we've been talking about, we need to write a book, we need to do this, shoulda, woulda, coulda, because it's something that's not that important until it's too late. But the thing about doing something with an actual ghostwriter is they will sit with you and help you, like you said, structure and craft the book. Because with Storyworth, one of my aunts did that. Sure. And it's cool. You can read it in her words, typos and all. That's who she is.
Sure.
But it's not going to have the trajectory. It's not going to be shaped basically in a novel structure is what people still expect when you read a memoir like this.
Sure.
And if you don't know how to structure it, that's one of the biggest problems when somebody telling their story, should I say. Like my family members who are good storytellers, they can't sit down and do this, not because they're not intelligent people. They're fantastic storytellers in a conversational way, sitting here like you and me.
Sure.
But to sit down and put it on paper and structure it and look at the narrative chunks, units, and then go back and edit it, that's an entirely different thing.
That's right.
And if you don't know how to do that, then you're going to have to learn how to do that, or you're going to have to hire somebody to help you with it. Yeah, so you're exactly right. That it's a different thing. It's a more involved service.
So tell me about this. So what makes a good story? Like, I think that since that your experiences in this is about shaping and crafting these stories, what do you think people are looking for when they are either, reading something, watching something? Because we, as humans, like, our nature is to listen to stories. Like, that's how we learn. That's how we kind of like acquire knowledge. There's something about somebody's life that has lived, the 30, 60 years, that when they're sharing with you, they're compacting all of their life experience into, these like, amazing morsels of knowledge, right? So what makes a good story?
Conflict. Character arc. I mean, they would have told us, if you go to any creative writing department, they're going to say conflict, tension. It's like music. So many things are connected. Like when you get into one art, like cooking and restaurant stuff, I'm sure that you see connections with everything else. Not to be too philosophical.
It's okay.
Like I'm probably speaking out of turn here.
No, you're good.
The ingredients of a dish, it's like a song. It's like a symphony. It's like a book. It's a story of its own. So we look for that. Even before the written word was created, we learned and we gathered up our sense of identity in story. And a lot of that is the character arc of where are you going? Are these things changing? Where are we moving to? And the conflict, the tension, like I was saying with music, like blues music, you've always got that flatted note. You've got that, as they call it, the blue note in jazz.
Sure.
And it's not out of key, but it's a little bit of dissonance there. And just about every song, you'll have something like that. Because if it's too sweet, John Denver-ish or, something, it's just too smooth sometimes, that's cool. But like rock music, blues, basically all American music, even gospel music to an extent, has that little bit of something's not quite right, and then it resolves.
Sure.
So that tension and resolution and back and forth. And that happens in people's lives.
Sure.
Like this fella, he didn't start off being the Christian man that he is now. He wasn't living the kind of life, and his book shows this trajectory of how he changed. God came and helped him in his life. And he was kind of on the fence about that. He's like, well, I don't want to promote a lifestyle that I'm against now. I said, well, if you're perfect in every way, then how can you teach a lesson to somebody? If they see that change, that trajectory,
that's right,
then they can understand that, oh, if he did this, I can do this too. Does that in some way answer your question?
It does. Okay. It does. I mean,
it's such a great question.
Yeah.
Man.
So like the tension that is done, I mean, that has to exist, I think, in multiple different fashions, right? Not only in biographies, but also like fiction, even like I think food has kind of like these elements that are coming together to create that swell of emotion and that sort of thing. In the case that in your writing, right, as you are crafting these stories, how much time does it take, or how much interview time does it take to get a page of work? Because I'm sure like
page,
is it like you have to? Does it flow at times? Is it easier at times? Is there some periods of times where you're not getting anything from the other person?
Man, I should have studied for this quiz, man.
I'm just curious.
I love the questions.
I'm just curious.
Joking with you. The reason that I charge a flat fee, because they'll say, well, do you do hourly? No, you don't want me to charge you hourly.
Sure.
Because it's going to be all over the place.
Sure.
Because there are some weeks, I try to do like 10,000 word segments.
Okay.
But some weeks, like if I do the outline, some weeks it's like pulling teeth, man.
Yeah.
It'll be 30 hours for one client's work.
Wow.
And then sometimes it'll be 10, 12 hours.
Oh, just flow?
Sometimes. And it depends on what I'm dealing with, too. The difficult parts of this book were like the emotionally difficult parts. Like the part where his father killed his mother.
Yeah.
I had to really tread lightly. I wanted to honor what had happened to this man and honor him and tell the story as it happened, because you're telling the truth, and there's a reason it's in there. But how do I handle this? I went through draft after draft after draft because I didn't want to be in it. That's another thing about being a ghostwriter. It's not your story.
Sure.
It's his voice. It needs to sound like him. So I labored over that thing over and over because I was like, I have to get this right for this man.
Sure.
So, yeah, it depends on what's going on in the story, how you're wanting to handle it, how complex the situation is. Because there are some situations where you'd have like three brothers. Like if this guy had three brothers who were very similar, a lot of times you would make them into a composite character. unless there's a reason to keep it. The actual three brothers. We talked about that in creative nonfiction classes at GSU, and there's a lot of controversy about that. So situations like that, how do you handle it? Going back and forth with the client, asking them questions about, hey, how do you want me to handle this? And what takes some time often is when you send the installment to the person, they have to read over it. And sometimes they'll say, this is great, don't change anything.
Sure.
And sometimes they say, well, I don't understand this, or this isn't a word that I would say, or can we change this around? And then you got to go back and do it.
Revise.
But in the beginning, you're getting to know them and they're getting to know you, so that happens more often. About halfway through the book, it's just smooth.
Flows.
Yeah. But yeah, it's different. It's all up and down. Every segment is going to be a totally different challenge.
What's the dream for your company, right? Like, so right now, I think that, I believe you are taking on clients, and it's a client relationship. How many clients do you have at one time?
How many could I handle, or how many do I have?
How many can you handle, I guess? Like, what do you max out at?
Well, I would say any more than, say, 4 or 5.
Is a lot.
Because if it was, I have 3 different kind of packages.
Okay.
And one is just for family.
Okay.
And it's like 100 pages, 30,000 words. This is twice that. It's 200 pages, 60,000 words, edited, formatted, self-published. Well, he went with a publishing company. But if it's the whole shebang, it's more work, it's more time. Probably 3 or 4 of those. If it was a smaller deal, I could probably do 5 or 6 of those. Yeah.
Are you planning on ever maybe having team members, like
yeah.
other team? Oh, you are. Do you have that currently? Ghostwriter for the ghostwriter.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Well, that's what the networks do. The ghostwriting networks,
Understood.
So it's like an agency. And the tricky thing with that, I know people say, well, you need to outsource.
Sure.
Don't be scared to outsource your stuff, because they get hung up on their widget, or they get hung up on their service. And it's like, I can't possibly hire anybody to do this. It's like saying, well, I have to do my taxes on my own, and it's an actual corporation. You're going to lose $100 million if you try to do it on your own. No,
That's
just
right.
get an accountant.
Yeah.
But eventually I would like to have an agency of sorts, something small, lean, mobile, something where I could build it up and do international clients, where I could do remote work with them. I like focusing now on this area because it's what I know.
Sure.
But eventually, yeah, I would see that getting bigger.
So is the game in here to eventually get to the point where you are doing, like, what's your goal? Like, are you trying to write a memoir for, like, Steve Jobs? Like, are you trying to, get like larger and larger clients? What's the dream for you?
Well, the dream for the company would just be not so much CEO people.
Okay.
I mean, that would be cool and all,
Yeah.
but there are people that already do that.
Sure.
There aren't as many people that serve the stories around here.
Love that.
Real people. Yeah, that's to do that, but to build it up to where I can kind of pick and choose out of the people that I want to work with,
Sure.
and have the other people do, say, the smaller jobs, that kind of thing. But the problem with that is I would have to vet those people, those
Gotcha.
writers, because I don't want, like with this, if my name's on it, I want it to be right.
Sure.
Especially if I'm doing it for somebody else, because that's another step. If it was my own book, that's one thing. But I'm writing it for you. I want you to be proud of it. I want me to be proud of it. If I bring somebody else in, I'm going to have to put them through their paces, man. And it's hard to, like you said earlier, it's hard to vet that person if they don't already have something like this.
Sure.
I mean, you can get somebody off of like Upwork or Fiverr to write your book for you for $100 and I'll write you a 100,000 word book in a month. They're really on there, yeah. And I've had a lady came to me. She had that done, and she was like, "Hey, can you edit this book?" And I said, "This is just incomprehensible.
Yeah,
I don't understand it."
Even...
And she said, "Well, I just thought I wasn't smart enough to understand it."
Yeah.
And I was like, I felt so bad for her. I'm like, man, I might have to rewrite this whole book. She said, I already spent $500 on it. I said, you're going to spend about $50,000 rewriting it too. She's like, well, I guess I won't do it. I'm like, I can't help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, people get taken for a ride with that kind of thing. But yeah, as far as bringing somebody else in, it'd have to be somebody I really know.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a creative writing department at GSU.
Yeah.
And that would be somewhere I would possibly source people from, but that's down the line.
Got you. How long have you been in this business?
Full time, just the last year and a half.
Wow.
But off and on since 2017.
2017. So it's only been, a relatively fresh company, right?
Yeah.
And then so, in terms of like full time, you said about 1.5 years. When did you make that move to go full time in this?
When I ran across this guy from Jessup, it was just I've never spent any ad money on a client that I've gotten. I mean, I've wasted a bunch of ad money, but this guy was friend of a friend of a friend. He came along and I quoted him a price. He didn't blink an eye. He actually went above what I quoted him. So I had the funds.
How do I get a client like that? Please let me know.
Well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I think there was somebody, a higher power, helping me out, because that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that does not happen.
He had wanted to tell the story for many years. He had people try to help him, and it just didn't work out. So a friend of a friend of a friend, I came sort of highly recommended to him, and he was like, well, you got a degree in writing. I like you. The big part about it, I went to his house and sat with him. I was from the area. And he said, hey, well, let's do it. And he was motivated. I mean, he feels called by God to tell the story and spread the message. And he's donating all of the funds to charities or charitable organizations. So I think that's, once I had that capital come in.
That's right.
I looked at it and I said, if I can do this, I've done this in the past, but it was kind of up and down, feast and famine kind of thing. And I thought, if I can take some time and learn how to market this, I can help some people, and I can do this for real. Why not? Which was really nothing new for me, because I quit my teaching gig.
Where were you teaching at?
I was teaching at Jeff Davis High School.
Is that local?
It's Hazelhurst, Georgia.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with that gig, but it just wasn't for me. And I decided, I had put everything together, and I was like, well, this writing thing, I need to figure this out, this ghostwriting thing. Because by that point, I had thought that's what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure. So I moved back in with my parents for a little bit, and then moved up to Statesboro, because I went to GSU here, and I liked it. I moved here with no friends, no connections, no money, and within 5 months had a client on the internet remotely. But I didn't know how to keep that marketing going. It was just kind of a luck thing, fell into my lap kind of deal. But once the capital came in from this, and he was good to me with this book, I saw that there was something I could do. And then I took a coaching class online from somebody that I really respect. And they said, well, what you're doing, you need to go out and do it old school. You need to get in front of these people. So I thought I was armed with the knowledge and the capital to be able to go out there and do it. Because if you're working a 9-to-5 job, I couldn't come up here and talk to you.
That's right.
And I couldn't drive to Jessup.
That's right.
I couldn't go do this and that. I wouldn't be available to do this. So, yeah, that's what started me off. I took that another leap, take the risk.
Do you remember taking that leap? Do you remember what you were at emotionally and how you felt? Because, this channel is really meant for entrepreneurs, people that are, either thinking about going into entrepreneurship, or people that maybe are in entrepreneurship. So we all have this moment in time that most of us have experienced of like jumping off that cliff, right? Yeah. And so how did you feel in that moment in time?
Exhilarated and terrified.
At the same time?
At the same time.
So how, I think that this point is so important, and I always try to ask people that come onto this show is like, what ultimately convinced you to just go for it? Because, this feeling of like, okay, so excited, right? You're like, man, this is what I want to do, passionate, right? But then at the same time, it's like, in the back of your mind, you have this voice that's saying like, okay, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if it doesn't work out, right? So at that moment in time, how did you push past that to break through and just go for it?
Well, I could go on and on about the answer to that, but I think our world has changed. The world, how old are you?
How old do I look?
I don't know, 30?
Let's go with that.
Okay. So as well as I do that the world of, say, my parents they're not quite 70 yet. The world of, say, our parents' generation doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. And I don't see, my temperament is not one to work a 9-to-5 job. It's not because, some people would say, oh, he's lazy, he doesn't work a job, But I don't, I just want the freedom to call my own shots.
Sure.
And I thought, well, I can't depend on the world of my father, because he worked at UPS for years. It was a very good job. But if you look at those jobs, like around, the railroads and places, a lot of these places that used to sustain these small towns, another 20, 30 years, they probably won't be here.
And what do you think it's going to get replaced with? This is so interesting. Because, I mean, what you're saying is very profound, right?
Well, I think either there won't be a need for some things, or AI will come in. I don't think AI will end up in Terminator 2 or something, looking for Sarah Connor or nothing like that. But I think it will change the world, and I think if you can't adjust, you're going to die. Not literally, but your career's gone, your money is gone, and people that, I don't mean to be a doomsday person, but I think if you cling too much to the 9-to-5 job, which is, there's no 9-to-5 anymore, it's 8-to-5, 8-to-6.
Sure.
I have a friend who is very highly qualified with an advanced degree. He's been looking for a job for a year and a half.
Wow.
Keeps getting turned down. And I looked at that and I thought, well, that's not the way to go. That's 20th century thinking. I have to go out here, whether I want to or not. I've got to figure out something to do because I'm about to be 36 years old. What am I going to do? Go back to school and get another college degree to go out there in this job market? I don't know.
Yeah.
No. And I don't, no knock against people that do that. But for me, no. So it was the fear that pushed me. That, and I thought the freedom. If I lose, I lose. If I win, I win, and it's on me. I want to take control of this.
And was that always kind of like in your blood? Is that something that always existed? Like you having the ability to call that shot?
I think so. I think it was having to shed a lot of, well, you're from around here originally. Yep. You probably picked up on this too. Maybe not your family, but just kind of you pick it up through osmosis. It's like, don't talk too loud. Don't say that. Get the good job at the mill. Have 2.3 kids and the white picket fence and the golden retriever in the yard. Nothing wrong with that. That's the American dream, brother. Sure. Why wouldn't you want that?
Sure.
But it's playing it safe, and that worked, and it still does work.
Sure.
But I don't know that I ever wanted that. Like I looked at my family, they're not entrepreneurs. They're good people. I learned to play the guitar. I'm a self-taught guitar player and played in a band since right out of college. Still play with them boys.
Yeah.
The lead singer is now the principal at Jeff Davis High School. It's like he helped me get into my teaching gig.
Sure.
He's still a little bit upset with me as I left. He's like, man, you looking for a teaching gig? Well, but I love him. But yeah, that world, I never really wanted a part of that.
Sure.
And I've always kind of felt guilty about it. Like, why can't you just do like other people do? But then after a while, I just leaned into it and said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to find a way to do it on my own. And if I win or lose, like I said earlier, it's going to be on me.
Sure.
I'm taking responsibility. I don't want to have to be, like when 2008 came along.
Yeah.
When, can we say the C word, the cerveza sickness, don't want to get canceled or nothing. When that came along, a lot of people understood that their jobs are not as stable as they thought they were.
Sure.
And it's terrible because those are things that are completely outside their control.
Sure.
They didn't deserve that at all.
Sure.
So I looked at this and I was like, if I can be lean and mobile and I can make a living and help people all at the same time and call my own shots, I think that was always in me. It just took me a while to do it, to make, like you're talking about, make the leap.
Yeah.
But it's worth doing.
Yeah.
If there's no guarantees.
That's awesome.
That's the thing, man. It's like, I wish jumping off into the deep end, somebody had been like, oh, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And everybody tells you, oh, you're going to be okay. But, there's a lot of people starving on the streets in Nashville. They're the best musicians you'll ever hear in your life. But they didn't make it. They weren't called up to the upper echelons of CMT or whatever because they didn't have the look.
That's right. That's right.
So, but it's been worth it for me so far.
That's awesome.
I love what I do. I love when I wake up every day. I love my life.
What advice would you have for someone, an entrepreneur, maybe a ghostwriter or a writer? What advice would you have?
Somebody doing what I'm doing?
Or that's wanting to try to get into the space.
I would say if you're a good writer, that's well and good. So is everybody. But what you really need, because my Professor Peter Christopher, he said there are people who can outwrite me any day of the week. but there are very few that can outwork me. So my change up to that would be, you might be the greatest writer in the world, but nobody cares if you don't have the soft skills, the people skills. If you can't go to this man's house, like I did with this fella, Mr. Padgett, sit with him at his table with his wife and talk with him and get his story and earn his trust, because you're an interloper.
Sure.
You're nobody. He has to get to know you. This is his life that he's trusting you with. Get those skills, because most writers are introverts.
Yeah.
I mean, I can come here and do this and like turn it on, but then later on today I'll have to just like unplug and chill out and recharge, because that's just how I am. I've come to terms with that. But a lot of writers, they are the introverted types.
Sure.
I mean, everybody wants to be Hemingway and go, kill lions or whatever. Well, you can't do that anymore. I'm on safari, be the man. I'm Ernest Hemingway, But not everybody can do that. Now, but everybody has a personality for that. A lot of artistic people, writers, musicians, they're really introverted people. You got to work on the soft skills, and you got to work on the marketing.
That's right.
The best advice I've ever heard is, in a business of any kind, whether it's a little small kind of solopreneur thing like I do, or something more expansive, or you have actual W-2 employees, marketing.
Yeah.
75% of everything you're doing needs to be marketing.
Yeah.
Because if you're sitting there talking about, I'm a really good writer, nobody cares. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to pay you for what you do. I mean, you can write fan fiction all day long for fun.
Sure.
But then you got to go to a day job. And that's fine if that's your life. But if you want to do something like this for a living, you got to help people first and foremost. So you got to get in front of those people. You got to talk to those people. And that's the scariest thing for a lot of writers, talking to people. No, I just want the clients to come to me. And that's how they end up on Upwork and Fiverr, and they get paid $500 for 6 months worth of work. Yeah.
That doesn't sound too pleasant.
Especially, it's a race to the bottom on that kind of thing, because there'd be somebody from, I don't know, another country where the American dollar is much stronger.
Sure.
And they're like, I'll write your book for $500, but they'll live for 6 months on that,
Sure.
So it's great for them. But if you're an American first world person, it's like, you need to learn the marketing, learn the networking. 2 years ago, I'd have been terrified to come here and do this.
Really?
Seriously, I'd have been like, podcast. And yesterday I was on the radio, the morning show here in town. I was like, I thought about it on the way up there. I was like, there's no way I would have done this 2 years ago.
Wow.
I'd have been terrified. But I looked at it and I said, it doesn't matter if you want to. You need to do this. If you want to live the life you want to live, you need to do this. And as I've kind of reshaped my mind, I've met great people. I mean, like you. Like, I made a new friend today.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
But otherwise, you can't just sit in your house and expect the clients to come along. It's like in the dating world, sitting there just twiddling your thumbs. I hope my perfect person comes along. It's like,
that's right.
You got to go out there and do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's huge. What I do see time and time again with entrepreneurs is that they find a way.
Yeah.
Regardless of whatever it is, whatever challenges that come, you talked about conflict earlier. That conflict of like, I don't know what is next to do. Entrepreneurs, time and time again, will push them to the limit to overcome, to achieve more. And that's exactly what I see kind of like happening in this case. So.
And that's the ones that can take the rejections and keep going.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that survive.
Yeah.
Because anybody can go out there and try and get shut down and say, I guess I'll go back to doing what I was doing before. But it's the ones that get knocked down over and over and over and get back up. That's the ones that are going to make it.
That's huge. Jordan, how do people get in touch with you? Like, what is the best way for them to kind of like, if they are looking for your services, is there a website? Is there an email address? How do they get in touch with you?
Probably the quickest way to get in touch with me is email. I'm an email guy. Like I said, I'm a writer. Jordan, JORDAN, @legacybiography.net. Not .com.
Okay.
.net.
Okay.
Or you can just call me or text me if you're a texter at 912-318-8508. And I do have a website, legacybiography.net. And there's a backslash at the end of that because I'm not a website designer. I'm a writer.
Okay.
I need to get better at that.
Okay.
But legacybiography.net with a little backslash. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Jordan, it's a pleasure to speak with you today.
You as well.
I had a phenomenal like you definitely opened my eyes to the world of ghostwriting.
And we didn't even get into AI. And
that's right. That's right. Oh man, yeah. That's a whole nother one.
It's another conversation.
But in here, I think that there's amazing kind of like things that you're doing for the community. The stories in this community are impactful, and I think that they often get overlooked. And the fact that you're spending so much time and effort to not only tell these amazing stories, but that you not like having your eyes set on kind of like the larger scale, but really kind of like taking the stories from this local market and putting them on like a higher platform, I think is absolutely amazing. I mean, that is something similar that the reason why I do my show is because, I have that opportunity to maybe speak with, people that are here in the local market. And I think that that's a huge inspiration to all of us. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.